This is Shabbos Yud Ches. We are finishing the Mishnah about what things you can light and what things you can't light. And first we're going to talk about wicks, and then the Mishnah is going to go into different oils that can't light, and we're going to talk about why we can't light them from these things. V'loi b'shemen sreifa. So the Mishnah continues, and now we're talking about oils. It's now with oil that has to be burnt. V'loi ba'aliyah, v'loi b'chelev, neither with sheep's fat nor with tallow. Nachamadi says, Madlikin b'chelev mevushal. He says, I want to kindle with boiled tallow. Chum say, echem mevushal, echem mevushal. Whether the boiled is not tallow is boiled or not boiled, then Madlikin boy cannot light with it. And the reason is you can't light with these wicks and with these oils is because one is going to have to adjust them on Shabbos. They don't light well, and they sparkle and sputter, and one might come to adjust it or relight them on Shabbos, so that's going to be a problem. Now is lechesh, Rabbi Chia bar Amar Luksha. It says that it's Luksha. Rabbi Acha b'shem Rabbi Laya that di danon, it's the danon. So I'm reading on, so we learned he hada, they are both the same thing. Luksha and then danon are the same thing. They're both lechesh. So lechesh is one of those two things. Belai b'chaysen. Now with chaysen, Rabbi Chanina b'shem Rabbi Pinchas. Rabbi Chanina says in the name of Rabbi Pinchas, Pishton shalai ninara, flax that has not been combed. Kamadaat amar, because it says v'hoya chosen lo naires. The strong, which is the word chosen, shall be as flax toe. V'lai b'chalach, and not with chalach. Anvin Caesarea, it's Caesarean Anvin. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Chizarti ad kol mifrosha yamim. I inquired all days amongst the seafarers to figure out exactly what this is. Amruli, they told me, Kulcha Shemai. Its name is Kulcha. V'lai bepis silas ha'idan, and not with Idan blast. Ir Nisa, this is willow. Delay bipsilas hamidbar, and not with the desert fiber. Kimishmo, but it sounds like tumbleweed. Delay biraika sha'al pnei amayim, and now with greens that are on the surface of the water. What is that? Kisen demai, flax of the water or lily pads. Delay bezefes, delay bishava, neither with pitch, neither with wax. Adkan lipsilis. Until here were all the wicks. Kanvelech lishmanim. And here on, we're going to talk about the oils. Rabbi Avuhu b'shem Rabbi Yechonam. Rabbi Avuhu says the name of Rabbi Yechonam. Ifnei ha'or ma'amsheich la'achrayev. Because of the flame that is drawn behind the wick, it flickers, and it's not clear and not clean. V'hu shaycheach mu'maitzi es ha'psila. And one might forget, and you pull out the wick or adjust it and do something with it. Or additionally, the flame does not ignite most of the material. And we learned the Gemara before, and we learned it again, that the rule is that when you light something on Erev Shabbos, you have to make sure that most of the material burns before Shabbos. So if you're going to light Neiris, which is just minutes before Shabbos, you have to make sure that most of the material is going to burn before Shabbos. And the problem is, in these bad wicks and these oils, it won't happen like that. And therefore, it's not allowed. Rab Zera asks, Mayata psila tricha hatzas b'roivadelas. Now, do we always say that a wick, that most of the lighting material must be ignited? What do you mean? A wick is never most ignited. The nature of a wick is that it doesn't get ignited until the very end. In other words, the top part will stay full of flame, but the bottom part that's in the oil will keep absorbing the oil, bringing it up to the flame. The wick will never burn out until way after Shabbos, until it's all the way at the bottom. Everyone knows that about wicks. And the oil itself. The oil cannot burn out until the wick absorbs enough of the oil into the flame that it burns out. It can take hours. So also Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Avu, B'Shem Rabbi Yechonam. Rabbi Shmuel came, Rabbi Avu, in the name of Rabbi Yechonam. Psila tzricha hatzaz b'rayv hadlakas. Indeed, whenever one uses a wick, most of the lighting material must be ignited before the Shabbos has begun. In other words, he's talking about most of the wick that sticks out from above the oil, that has to be lit. Most of it has to be lit. Hasivain Chavreya, and the scholars asks, V'ha but what about the law of the beam? Right? We learned the law of the beam before. Right? Now, in the case that since the outer layer of the wood has already ignited, the fire did not catch most of the lighting material, and yet we still say it's fine. We learned that as long as it burnt enough that it can no longer be used, even if not most of the material has been burnt, it's still fine. So how could you allow that? Hasis Rabbi Bar Mamo. Rabbi Mamo asked, but what about a lantern? The fire does not catch most of the lighting material ever. Like we talked about. Tiny bit of wick and oil. And the kerosene or oil or material just keeps coming up. It never happens until hours later. So what are you talking about? So I'm Reb Shammai. Reb Shammai says, Loi Kain Amar Reb Ze'er Rabbi Yehuda B'Shem Rav. Did not they say that Arba Meduroi Shel Shehem, that 4 pyres are allowed to be done. Pyres with a P, those are like bonfires. Those are big fires, or bundles, fire made into a bundle. How is that? Maduras Agefes, whether it's refuse, Maduras Hazeles, whether it's fertilizer, Maduras Achelev, or it's fats, Maduras Hagilinim, or this is pits. So Kol Shehem, even slightly, because what's going to happen? They're eventually going to do a slow burn. So in other words, what's the deal with that? Everyone knows they burn slowly and they burn consistently. So therefore, only a little bit has to be burned before Shabbos, because it's known they will eventually burn fully and they'll burn slowly and the heat will last always. So a lantern will be the same exact thing. We know the wick is not going to burn all the way to the bottom. No one's going to be adjusting the wick, saying, burn faster, burn faster. It's not the way it works. Everyone knows a tiny bit of the wick is on fire. The rest of it absorbs the oil. That's a teva of the thing. That's the way it works. V'oid min hada de Rabbi Chav Taflifa Sha'al Rav Chizda. Furthermore, Rav Taflifa asked Rav Chizda, V'lokein Alpha and Rebbe, and did not the Rebbe teach that Shabbos Shechol Liyos b'Chanukah, a Shabbos that falls out on Chanukah, it is also forbidden to use any of these type of wicks for the Chanukah or for the Shabbos. Now, why? Why is he saying Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah is a different halacha than Shabbos. Shabbos, people read by it. Hanukkah, people do not read by it. And if you don't read by it, you're not going to adjust the flame, right? If you're going to read by it and you want the light to be better, then you may pull it out, you may adjust it, you may relight it. But Hanukkah neiros, since you can't use them anyway, you're not going to care about whether they flicker, what happens to them. Maybe. That's the Havamina. So now I'm going to answer. Shasa Leroy's Mitabeya or Hanukkah. One is not. It's forbidden to look at a coin by the light of the Hanukkah. He's not going to forget and take out the wick. That's Avmina. However, Havi less Tama de la Mishum Shala Yuhutzas or Beravedalek. The fire that ignite most of the material. So we have two things. One is, but still, you have the halacha is that most of the lighting has to happen. These are not consistent things like charcoal or the pyres we talked about before. They're not consistent, and therefore they have to have roiv lit before it gets dark on Friday. Another answer we could say out loud is Hanukkah, even though you don't read by the Hanukkah neiros, you need the Hanukkah neiros to last 30 minutes. So it's what we know that halacha, that once a person lights the Hanukkah neiros, whether it goes out, it's fine if it could have lasted 30 minutes. However, when you're lighting with this material, now you don't know if it can last 30 minutes. Therefore, a guy's going to patchka with it. He's going to do everything he can to make sure it lasts for those 30 minutes so he knows that the Hanukkah neiros were done properly. That also is a problem, because now he's going to light right before Shabbos, then it's going to come dark, and he's going to patchka with it to make sure it lasts the appropriate amount of time. That's a problem for Hanukkah also. Loi b'shem and kick, and we can't do it with kick oil. So Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi, he says, kisusa, it's cottonseed oil. So obvious question, for those who know a little bit of history, cotton is a major American production. America was not discovered until 1,500 years after the Gemara started to be written. Where did they get cotton oil from? Actually indigenous to the East, the Southeast Asia, the Kazakhstan area, Pakistan area, India, that area. How do we know this? Because in the Megillah, it says, Hor, Karpas, Utecheles. Hor. We had white cotton. Where did you get the cotton from? The cotton came from that area, the Stan area in Southeast Asia. So that's what they had cottonseed oil from. Rabbi Yoina, Rabbi Zeira, B'Shem Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yoina, Zeira, said name Yehuda, Aidhu Shmoy Kik. It's a name of a bird called a kik. So Tani Rabbi Shmuel, he learned Hakos Zekik. What we call the cuss bird, that's a kik. V'lai B'Shem and Sreifa, and not with oil has to be burnt. Amar Rav Chizah says, Zoysa Meres Sha'asor Lahatzis Es Ha'or Meduras Kedoshim. This teaches that they're forbidden to light a fire on a pile fire of offerings on a Friday. V'hi Deleka Helechas Shabbos, even though it will continue to burn on Shabbos. V'ataninan, but we learned in the Mishnah, Umachzi Zizin Esaor Meduras Beis Hamoiked. One may touch a fire from the pyre of the fire chamber to make more of a fire to keep warm on Shabbos. Ugvulin Kadesha Yutas or Beruvin. But outside the Gvulin, the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash itself, then you need to have most of it lit. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yosef says, by Shabbos says, Loi Sasa Kol Malacha. Don't do any malacha over. Nases Hi Ma'aleh. It may be done on its own. You cannot do the malacha, but it may be done on its own. The Ram Hacha, however, here, Hatoira Amar Ein Surfin Es Hakadoshim B'Yom Tov. That's that you may not burn sacred things on Yom Tov. The Ein Tzricha Leimer Shabbos, and it goes on saying you can't do it on Shabbos. So my Chemes Leimer came. What reason do you say that you can't burn Kedoshim things have to be burnt on Yom Tov and Kal V'Chomer on Shabbos? So loisa siri menu ad boiker v'noisa menu ad boiker be'eches roifu. It says by the carbon pesach that if it's left over till morning, it says you should not eat it. Do not leave it over, right, until the morning. Anything left over until the morning, you burn it. So 1 second, it said don't leave it over till morning, and everything left over till morning gets burnt. It said don't leave it over till morning twice. So what does that mean? Achar shnei brakim, after 2 mornings. After it's left over on the 15th day by morning, so then you leave it over again. You leave it over to burn on the 16th. So once it's left over onto the 15th morning, you can no longer eat it. It has to be burnt. But when do you burn it? You leave it over one more morning to the 16th, to Chal Moyed, and that's when you burn it. We don't burn on Yom Tif things, even Hektish, that has to be burnt, unless it's specifically required for the Beis Hamikdash. So Kal V'Chomer, Shabbos, Uksiv, and it says, Hamnoiser, Bifsar Hazevach, B'Yom HaShlishi, B'Eish Yisroifu. It says, what is left over from the meat of an offering shall be burnt on the fire on the 3rd day. So Shalom thinks it'll be 2 days. So why say the 3rd day? The answer is, if it ends up pulling on Shabbos, you wait till Motzei Shabbos, or you wait till the Sunday morning. Mahu lahatzes or beduras chametz. So what is the law regarding lighting a fire for the fire burning chametz? Do we allow it to go ahead and linger until Chamisha Asr, until the 15th? Man the yalef la b'naiser. The one who learns it from Nicer, that just like you have to burn Nicer, you wait another morning. So and then yes, it's the same halacha, you burn chametz Asr. So it's forbidden to allow it to keep burning into Yom Tif, because you learn it from Nicer. You have to do it completely when it's going to burn in a time when it's mutter. So you have to make sure that it does not burn through into Yom Tif, and you got to stop that fire. Uman the law yolaf Nicer, like Chum, who said you don't have to learn from Allah Nicer, mutter. It's permitted for it to keep burning. Obviously, Allah is the Chum has to be burnt by the 15th of the nightfall. In matter of fact, even earlier than that, while it's still day on the 14th. We learned that from the Torah. So the fire itself, though, that had burned the chametz, that could be left. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the fire itself. Chametz, no. Chametz cannot be left over. But the fire itself that had been burning the chametz, that can be left over. Will not continue to be burning into Shabbos, into the night of the 15th. Rav Acha b'shem Rav Chisda, Zois Omeres shemuter lahatzis esaor b'meduras kedoshim. The following source teaches us that it's permitted to light a fire on a pyre of invalidated offerings, that's Erev Shabbos, v'hi deleka v'haylechas with Shabbos, and even though continue to go ahead and burn into Shabbos, v'hatanam. For we learn, emad likin b'shem and shreifa b'yam tov. We not kindle with burnt oil on Yom Tov that has to be burnt. So since we learn that with tummy oil that has to be burnt on Yom Tov, so we learn that also that Shabbos. So no, we're talking about a Yom Tif that actually fell on Erev Shabbos, and that's the reason why it can't be done. According to this, right, we learn that now one should not light, what must be learned at night. You can't do it at night. Why can't you do it at night? Because al shem she'ein surfing as kedoshim b'layla. Because we don't burn anything. We don't bring karbanas at night. Since we don't bring karbanas at night, therefore anything that has to be burned should not be done at night. It should be done by daytime. At the time you do karbanas, just like karbanas should be done daytime, the burning of other things should also be done by daytime and not by night. But Beis Hamikdash is closed at dark until morning.